I'm here today with Phil Graham. Phil's a serial entrepreneur, an international speaker, author, and the man behind multiple global masterminds for business owners. He was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at just the age of 16, was told that his life would be forever limited, and has spent every single day since that point proving it wrong. In this episode, we get into what it actually takes to protect your energy when everything is fighting for it as a business owner, why most people who think they have ADHD might in fact just have a boundaries problem, the non-negotiables that Phil swears by to keep him dangerous, and one hard truth about building a business that most people are not willing to hear. Phil is widely respected in the business and coaching industry, and I was super excited to have him on as a guest. I know you're going to get a ton of value from this episode today, so let's get into it. Well, look, Phil, thank you for being here today. I am very much looking forward to this. I've had messages all day from tons of people who have obviously seen me put on my story that you are coming on board. And so I know there's going to be tons of people that are listening to this and that are going to listen to this as well and get tons of value for this. So thank you for coming on.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me on. And most importantly, thank you for editing these podcasts because I know how much work and effort that goes into them. So fair play to you, Jack. So listen, I'm all yours. I'm ready to rock and roll and share whatever I can. So ask away.
Amazing. Well, I want to start off with the time in your life when you were 16. I know you were diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at 16, and the narrative that was given to you was basically that your life is forever going to be limited. And you've evidently turned that on its head. And a lot of my audience have had kind of like a similar experience, being told that their brain is broken, that they'll always struggle. This is the overarching narrative that is online. And I'm curious to hear from your point of view, what was the turning point where you stopped accepting that limitation or the limitation that other people were trying to put onto you, and you started using that as fuel to build what you've built today?
Well, there's a couple of things. First things first is whenever you're diagnosed with something that's medical, you'll notice that the language is speculative. So there's things like might, could, potentially, chance of, likelihood. Those words aren't certain. So that was the first thing that made me realize that there's control here, and this depends on X and Y. So I realized that there was a little bit of a gap there, and I looked at what are the areas and subjects and skills that I need to develop in order to fight this. And I made a choice at that particular moment to be utterly defiant and say to myself, I'm going to refuse to let this happen, because the people that were telling me this stuff were not in any way, shape, or form people that I wanted to listen to, wanted to role model. And I sensed a gap in their conviction in telling me. I sensed the uncertainty in it. And I went and looked at the areas that I needed to master to develop certainty in my life. And I built my entire life around those skill sets in order to control my life. And I essentially adapted. I was dealt a card that was sent to kill me, and I adapted and I turned my mess into my message. And the first thing that I focused on was the variables that I could control. And I took control of those, and I started living out my life, planning my calendar in accordance to the life that I wanted to have. And the life that you want is built on one, first of all, defying your circumstances. Two is getting very, very clear on the skill sets that you need to build. And three, taking action on those, measuring the results of those, and essentially going again and again and again and again until it becomes habit, until it becomes an identity. And I did things that were essentially initially frowned upon by the medical community. I did things that were unheard of, and I haven't looked back since. So I'm very grateful for the diagnosis in my life. Why? Because it set me on a trajectory to discover myself. It set me on a trajectory to learn skills that I then turned into a career, that I then used to help others, help myself, build a life of purpose. A life of purpose is built around having meaningful tension in your life that is designed around a mission worth pursuing. And I got really, really good at it. And I eventually started helping other people with the same thing. And the very thing that was sent to kill me is the very thing that actually made my life utterly amazing. And I totally owned it and committed to being the man that I wanted to be. And well, trained myself, kept myself accountable, and created boundaries around my life in order to safeguard it. So, yeah.
One thing I'm really curious about, because it's such a interesting and just like powerful story that I know for so many different reasons, and even if the context is different, so many people are going to resonate with that desire to like push back against a narrative that they don't agree with and that doesn't serve them. And I know for me, for different reasons, that's been a large part of what's taken me on this journey and what's obviously led to this podcast that you're on today. Now, that can be really difficult for a lot of people. where so-called like experts are ultimately telling them that this is objectively true. You have been given a death sentence in your case, and you are
Yeah.
forever going to be limited with this diagnosis that you've got. Now, it's almost like counterintuitive to go against that grain. For you in doing that, when were the first signs of evidence that actually me not doing what they had told me I should be doing was the right thing?
Self-belief in terms of I'm going to make this happen. I'm going to commit to something and I'm going to do something that's never been done before. And you know what? I'm going to find out. And I wasn't afraid of the consequences. I definitely took advice on board, but the reality is I didn't understand fully what was going on. So my first port of call was to understand what was going on. And when I began to understand what was going on, then I could look at advice and throw it out the window because the majority of people that were telling me what to do didn't have the condition, didn't have the skill sets, and were merely reading what they thought I needed to hear. So the reality is, I have always been a very defiant individual. If I'm told to do something, I won't do it, provided that it's outside of my values and outside of my goals and vision that I have for my life. And I was relentless in the pursuit of creating options and freedom for myself. And I felt that that was removed with the advice that I was given. And it was a quest for a better way. That's it. That can be applied to so many elements in life. You have to hit rock bottom in order to be able to ask yourself or say to yourself that there must be a better way. And that's what opens up the mind to then go and explore the better ways. And that is where you have to put yourself out there. That is where you have to take risks. That is where you have to go alone. But ultimately, it's the best way to build self belief. And that requires courage. Courage is essentially acting in the face of uncertainty. And I needed to lead myself. And I'm so glad that I did. And I've taken that principle now into every area of my life. And I also inspire others to do the same. And there's nothing worse than being on the planet and resenting your life or hating your life. And it's your duty to do something about it. If you don't like something in your life, what are you going to do about it? Build the skill sets, build the life that you want, and go after it. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And very synergistic with the beliefs that I have as well is almost like just refusing to accept that's ultimately the case. And despite not necessarily having evidence that other people are able to do this or have done this, what I'm hearing from you is just having this unwavering belief in self that I need to go and fucking figure it out. I need to do
Yeah.
whatever's required in order to make that happen, whether that's obtaining the skills, bulletproofing your experience, whatever it is. Which leads me on to something kind of interesting that I wanted to ask you whilst we're talking about, I guess, that inner game in the inner world. Because at every level of business, you have to become a different person to get to the next one. Like new levels, new devils, and all of that jazz. And I know for you on your journey, which has been crazy journey from personal training on the gym floor to an author to running multiple at this point global masterminds for business owners, and obviously then having your own documentary on Amazon Prime. For you, like what's been the biggest identity shift that you've had to go through? And was there a moment that you can recall where you really like had to shed that part of yourself? Now, this might be in relation to what we're discussing now, but it doesn't matter if it isn't, if it's more kind of further on that journey for you.
I, I go through an identity shift every day. Every day I have certain limiting beliefs, certain challenges, certain issues that are holding me back that I can't see through. And I have to step into the version of myself that solves those issues, moves through those issues. I have recreated myself multiple times in both my personal life, my professional life, and one needs to be comfortable with that and being open to surrendering what they think is who they are in order to come into a new identity, an evolved identity that is able to have greater levels of awareness. Awareness is your ability to hold uncertainty as well as certainty. And identity shifts are a part and parcel of growth. Everything in life grows and everything dies. It's the same with relationships. Relationships blossom for a while, they die. New relationships are born. Anything that you get rid of in your life creates a vacuum for something better. And you have to realize that in life, nothing ever stays constant. There's change with everything. And even though that change may be uncomfortable, that is pulling you forward and you have to trust the flow of life. Life has a predetermined theme that everything will always work out. And your greatest power comes whenever you ride the wave of that and you trust that and you don't resist and you don't grip too tightly. So in life for me, it's not gripping too tightly to the identity, to the results, to the status, to the achievement, to the safety. that I've got, knowing that it can be found elsewhere along the way. Because, like I said, everything in life always works out. There's a predetermined theme. And the majority of people don't believe that. And they grip very tightly to trying to control things. And that is why they suffer. And that's why they never change, because they try to control everything and grip everything so tightly. But markets change, people change, values changes, health changes, business changes, team members change. Change is real and change is important. And any change that unsettles you is usually highlighting an area that you need to grow and develop. And it's up to you to trust that growth and development to become a broader, wiser, more aware, self assured human being.
Why might somebody hold so tightly onto that identity and self concept, which, as we've highlighted, is detrimental to them being able to evolve? And what would your advice or suggestion be to them to loosen that grip and allow themselves to go through this evolution and roll with the fluidity of life?
Well, they hold on to it for a number of reasons. Number one, they've built a routine and series of habits and lifestyle that makes them feel safe. And new things are unsettling to that. New things are going to call them to disrupt that lifestyle, spend money, spend time, invest time, get out of their comfort zone, experience rejection and failure. And then they begin procrastinating. Then they begin looking at distractions. Add to that the world of quick dopamine and the environment. And you end up with somebody that diagnoses themselves with some kind of condition when the reality is they're just afraid of disrupting their routine. And their routine can give them limited results, but the routine also feels safe. So I see a lot of founders hiding and men and women hiding in fear of change because they're afraid of failure and they don't trust the flow of life and they try to control every element of it and they hide. And that hiding is masked as doom scrolling, procrastination, addictions. I mean, all of those things are really an escape from reality. They're an escape from leaning into and embracing the difficult, the non-stimulatory, day-to-day boring actions that are required to build a great life. So, you have to ask yourself, why am I avoiding this? Right? Why am I procrastinating? Why am I spending time on this when I know that's a priority? And it's fear. It's fear of humiliation, fear of death, and fear of illness. These are the three chronic fears that every human has. Getting real with that is important, but learning whenever you're presented with something that scares you, that's a signal to move. And again, I could go into the deeper reasoning behind that, but being comfortable with death, being comfortable with failure, being comfortable with ridicule is the highest form of self-awareness and self-love and appreciation, where you're able to walk in and march into scenarios and not worry about those things because you've already accepted them, and understand that on the other side of those things is great, massive personal awareness, growth, and self-love that comes from trusting yourself and backing yourself. Most people hide and dick around because they don't trust themselves.
Something that we're going to go into the brain in a moment. I've got a question I want to ask before that because I am really curious to hear your thoughts on this. Obviously, we'll dive into that. You mentioned there about habits, that some people are repeating the same habits day in, day out, and that's keeping them in their current identity and ultimately creating this incubator that they believe is the only space of which that they can operate within, and that thus creates the results in their life. Now, I assume you have always got a lot going on. You seem to be an absolute machine. With the businesses, with you being a dad, with you being an investor, you've got your fingers in so many pies. What are your non-negotiables? Like both personally, the rhythms and the routines that keep you performing at your best. And then also like the business, the things that you refuse to compromise on, no matter how busy you get or how successful the business becomes.
Personal is 8 hours sleep every night. Stillness during my day, space to pause, look at what's going on in my mind, observe it, watch it, merge with it. A reflective planning. How did my day go? What worked? What didn't work? Where was I pissed off? Why was I pissed off? Looking at filtering my mind, connection with the people that I love, learning something new and doing something that is uncomfortable or an irreversible action that pulls me into a higher, stronger identity than where I'm at now. That trains me to understand that it's safe. I could go into other specifics. I make sure that I'm very well hydrated. I make sure that I eat food that nourishes me. I make sure that I move daily. I train for feel. I don't train for performance. I train for feel. So sometimes I want to do weights. Sometimes I want to do martial arts. Sometimes I want to do hot yoga. I listen to what my body needs. This morning, I wanted to train outside in the sun with my top off, even though it's like March. My body just wanted that. And on a business front, one, making sure that I'm advertising every day. Two, making sure that I make an offer every single day. Three, that I make sure that I delegate something every day and check in with my team to make sure that they're clear. Last but not least, that I focus on the biggest constraint limiting factor in the business, my biggest non-negotiables.
Yeah, totally synergistic with everything that anybody who listens to this podcast will pick up on. And that's like, if anybody could take anything from today, it's like you literally just got the blueprint and the playlist that you've given people there, that if they're going to focus on anything, it's going to be those things. So
Yep.
that alone, if that was the only piece that they'd plug into, they would get a ton of benefit from. Now, let's crack open the chat around brain types and your view of this. I'm curious because everybody has such a unique perspective on the word ADHD and brain types, etc. I've never seen you speak about this publicly. That's obviously not why I brought you on or anything like that, but we were having a little chat before we came on air, and I'd just be curious to hear your thoughts on this. Like, my perspective is I personally don't align with ADHD, hence my whole business is being built around something called the Hunter Brain, but I'd be curious to hear your own view on this, whether that be in relation to other people that you observe or any anecdotal experience with your own brain.
Unless there's a clear clinically diagnosed imbalance that has been measured and statistically presented to an individual as an abnormality, the majority of people that claim they have ADHD are using it as an excuse to avoid the decisions, the moves, the actions, and the steps that they need to take to build a better life. And they default to some excuse to wrap themselves up in an excuse, and they build that as a narrative. And they focus more on the narrative than the limiting factor in their life. And if you look at how society, technology, and environment has evolved, the average person cannot watch a Netflix movie now without being double screened. The average person cannot consume an Instagram reel of 60 seconds. If you want to see the evidence of that, go and look at the reels on your story, and you'll realize that most people average watch time is 9 seconds, 10 seconds, 13 seconds. And also look at your own day-to-day habits. If you go to reply to a message and then automatically flick into Instagram and then flick back to the message, flick onto your computer, well, why are you doing that? The reason why you're doing that is because you have to focus, and focus requires brain power. And the reality is, it's far more entertaining, rewarding, and energizing to consume food videos, videos of the opposite sex, car chases, fashion, what life could be like, than it is to do the work to create the life you want. And we have been increasingly exposed to more of those sound bites, more of those visual bites than ever before. And it's one of the reasons why so many people feel down behind, is because they're constantly comparing themselves to a highlight reel that is now an environment where their distraction is pulled from pillar to post every second. And one of the main things that has allowed me to have a superpower in life and business, and I don't know what I have, but I'm definitely not normal. And I don't know if I'm on the spectrum or whatnot, but I don't browse social media at all. I spend a lot of time outdoors. I fish, I shoot, I hunt, I go for walks, I take stillness during my day. I don't browse social media. I go on it to do research. I go on it to sell. I use it as a tool. I sit with my thoughts. I write, and I do things that are genuinely hard. And if you go out for a full day shooting, you don't have time to go on your phone. And when you're out with other high performing men that don't need to be browsing social media, and you sit down and you break bread and you have food and you have fire and you hunt and you do all of this kind of stuff up in the mountains where nobody can get a fucking hold of you, it's very hard to have a bad day after that. Whereas if you wake up in the morning and you check your phone, then you go and check on your ex, then you go and check on a business partner, a competitor, then you don't know how to delegate in business and you haven't got the skill set, and you're scared and you're maybe underslept and you maybe watched a horror movie the night before and you doom scroll constantly, and then you're on the energy drinks, it's fucking pretty easy to understand why your brain's fucked. So when I see all that, and I see somebody touting that they've got ADHD, and I'm like, show me your day. Show me what you're actually doing to protect yourself. Show me your boundaries, right? It's far easier for me to sit here and, watch shooting videos than it is to sit here and review my data from February, make core decisions. But on the other side, I know that those decisions are going to be the very thing that allow me to go and, take my wife on a private jet to the Cotswolds at the weekend, have a glass of champagne and smoke a cigar and mind my own business, which brings me significantly more excitement and fulfillment than the short-term gratification of browsing another burger video, right? So yeah, you need to starve those distractions. And most people don't want to starve those distractions because they're too fucking scared to do the fucking long-term work that actually builds a great life. You're not going to build a great life in an instant hit. Instagram's going to make you think that. But if you have that expectation, you're fucking glued. So, before you say you've got ADHD, take a cold, hard look at your day to day, look at the boundaries that you've set for yourself, and look at how you're de-risking yourself against distraction, right? If you're sitting on, at night with your partner on your fucking phone while you're watching a Netflix video, you're not present. You're trying to get dopamine hits off complete delusion shit that's coming up. So understand that's a big, big threat to your overall sanity, peace of mind, and clarity. And I wanted to call that out because a lot of people are misled and mistaken with all that. So yeah, hope that helps.
But brilliant insight. I think so many people get it conflated. And I think that ADHD is a label that people either feel totally repulsed by and it's like this polarizing thing, or
yeah,
they see
look, here's what I would advise. And I'm not a doctor, but any doctor listening to this will nod their head in agreement. I would like to think so. But before you go and diagnose yourself, take a very clear stock on what you want from your life. And if you don't have goals, if you don't have a vision of what you want in your life, then you haven't dared to dream. And if you haven't dared to dream, it's because you're afraid of choosing or deciding a future that you might fail at. Whenever you set goals, you define failure, black and white. Most people don't like to fail. Totally understandable. You'll look like a loser. You might not do well. You might end up on the street. You might risk money. You might risk reputation. You're going to have to sacrifice things, and it might all fall on its arse. Big fucking deal. You can recover from it because you've survived your own worst days. But get clear on what you want from your life. That creates intention. When you create intention, then you have a filter through the way that you look at the world, and you look at things as either moving you towards the intention or moving things away from the intention. So the first thing is to set the filter and the frame of what you want. Whenever you set the filter and frame of what you want, you lock in. And whenever you lock in, you've got coordinates. So if I want to build a 10 million a year business, I'm going to know that going to the pub on a Tuesday afternoon is going to potentially conflict with those goals because I have to take time away. I have to potentially recover from the alcohol. It might hinder my sleep and whatever. But I might annoy Jack and John who want to spend time with me talking shit about the football. And I might not be confident enough in myself because I might not have any other friends. And therefore, I lower my self-worth and I go to the pub even though I don't want to. So the first thing is I'm starting to train my brain into, I need to validate myself by pleasing others. Okay. Add to the mix, what's in your calendar for the week? Is there anything in there that's correlated to your goals? A lot of people say they want to be a millionaire, but when you look at their calendar, look at their behaviors, it's like the complete opposite. If you looked at my calendar, you will see every R is dialed. And every R is essentially geared towards the biggest limiting factor that's holding me back. And I spend a lot of time making sure that my activities and my behaviors are aligned with that, right? And if they aren't, then the world is going to fill it with distractions. The next thing is looking at the stimuluses that my body and brain get. So for example, these are a couple of things that have really, really helped me. I'm going to do like a before and an after. Number one, if you are constantly eating throughout the day, it's going to throw your blood sugars up and down. Number two, if you're taking a lot of caffeine in and out throughout the day, it's going to fucking jack your mood up and down. Number three, things like aspartame, Diet Coke. I used to drink a lot of Diet Coke, but whenever you're getting even a sugary hit or a sweetness or whatever, it does something to your brain that I don't quite chemically understand, but it will throw your focus, right? Black coffee, water, salt in the water, make sure your electrolytes are there, intermittent fasting, blood sugar stable as a rock, well hydrated, clean caffeine, hours sleep. And I love a big feed, right? Probably from bodybuilding for so long. I love the ability to look forward to a big feed, and I have it at a time when I'm resting, right? And that's not to say that you can't eat throughout the day. What I'm just saying is blood sugar correlates with mood. And I wrote a fucking encyclopedia on this stuff, on diabetes. So I know everything about blood sugars. If I want to screw up my energy, I will eat a lot of carbs frequently in and out of the day, and I'll have a lot of highly processed food, which spikes me all over the place. If you want to get me on a bad day, it's usually when I'm like, I've let loose and I've let go. That along with poor sleep hygiene, looking at screens late at night, your focus is going to be out the window. And business is a game of mitigating risk. So it's a game of making decisions around risk. You are not going to lean into risky decisions if you are tired, not thinking correctly, or you are, and you're going to make mistakes. And then those mistakes are going to happen more frequently because you're not clear. So that's why you never like fly a plane unless you've been properly rested. Why? Because your decision-making ability is down. On top of that, you then add in emotional resilience and ability to process and feel emotions. Now we're going into like stuff here where we could talk for hours. But if you do not have agency over your life and you do not know how to feel, process, manage, and metabolize your emotions into meaning and calm and regulate yourself, you're going to be fucked, right? So I assume your audience is predominantly male, but I'm going to give you a very fucking clear example. And I want you to think back to a time where you infatuated with a woman and how much that controlled the frame of your day, right? That is huge, right? So when you like dedicate your life force to getting validation from somebody else, like I don't think there's anything more distracting for a man than subordinating and putting somebody on a pedestal, whether that's another female, whether that's another peer or whatever. But if your whole entire life is geared towards, I get my self-worth from, you will, if you're single and you're dating and whatever, you will know exactly what I'm talking about. You could also correlate that with conflict, death. If you cannot process your emotions well and quickly, you will suffer and that will pull your distraction. Add to that the environment of social media, a mobile phone, notifications. You're just asking for trouble. My phone has been on silent for the last 10 years. I have no notifications on my phone. The only notifications that I get are when I go into the app. I have one email live on my phone. I can only access my main emails whenever I go onto my desktop. I have the right team in the right place to do the stuff that I don't want to do. And in order to be able to afford that team, of course, I had to eat dirt, make money, invest that money, build that team, train that team, mentor that team, and hold that team in place while I fucking figured it out and carried the weight. And you are going to have to go through periods of, this is going to suck for a while until I make some money. You are going to have to go through seasons of, I'm going to have to carry the load until I figure this out. You then have the overall ability to pause during your day. So like today, I had 4 hours back-to-back stuff. I then took a pause in the middle of the day where I sat with a coffee and just watched my thoughts and waited until I got to a point where I was ready to go back. So there's a lot of things there that are fighting for your attention. There's a lot of things there that are fighting for your energy, and you have to be aware of what they are. And for me, clear times that I look at my phone, clear delegation, good sleep, intermittent fasting, stable blood sugars, hydration, salt and electrolytes. You don't need to go and buy an expensive electrolyte powder. If you're spending fucking £2 on a pouch of electrolytes, you need your head looked at. It's just flavored salt, good black coffee or tea. If you do want to eat during the day, protein rich, high fiber, keep stable sugar. If you want to crash your sugars, go and have a packet of squishies. See how you feel after those. The right training. Training gives you energy. Get outside in nature and meditate. Add all those things in and you're fucking dangerous. And don't hang around with dickheads. Have an absolute zero tolerance policy for anyone in your circle that doesn't allow you to be fully 100% yourself. That is the litmus test in life. If you cannot be 100% yourself, they should not be in your company. If you are 94%, 93% off with someone and you can't be yourself, they're the wrong people. So, and it's the same in business. Never go into something that you're 100% all in on. So yeah, hope that's been enough to share. Hope that's been useful, insightful. I like kind of getting straight to the point with stuff. So,
Totally. Like, and just to consolidate all of that for the audience as well, like what is evident from what you're saying there is that, because I see you just from like obviously the outside and obviously us chatting today as well, you are like the antithesis of what I imagine and what I create, like the Hunter Brain. You've just got a tremendous amount of infrastructure and systems to your own lived experience, and you've got that fucking dialed, which is awesome. And like you spend all of your time focusing on what I call creator dopamine. So like you are doing hard shit that is where you get dopamine from. Everything that you've just said there is like you are going and like earning your reward and your dopamine, as opposed to so many people find themselves in this space of consumer dopamine. They get their dopamine fix from doing fuck all and it gets given to them. And there's so many studies that are coming out now as to like the impact on the brain when you don't have to now work for the same reward and what that does to us over the long term.
it's junk food, right? You know, It's like pornography for a guy, right? Sets up false expectations, instant gratification. Whereas if you want to have, a really enjoyable sex life, go and work for it, go and build it up, create tension. There's a whole like anything that's short term pleasurable is in the most cases junk. And that can even relate to food, right? I would far rather eat a bar of dairy milk from the fridge than I would a slice of roast beef, at times, right? Like, I'm not going to lie, right? It tastes good. I always feel shit after it, right? So the real question that I want to close on here before I go is apply the filter to your life. Is this going to nourish me? And that applies to engaging in a conversation, engaging in a piece of food, engaging in going to bed at 9:30 versus 11:49, where nothing gets done. Let's be real. The very minute that it gets after 9:30 to 10 o'clock, unless you're watching an invigorating movie and you're sitting on Instagram, dicking around and hoping to plan your day the night before, nothing gets done after that time. It's wasted. And also give yourself permission to rest. Like, a lot of people are building a business just to simply perform. And you can tell how much you're performing by how exhausted you are. And if you're exhausted, tired, well, check how much you're performing. And most people that say they're burnt out aren't burnt out. They're bored. Burnout is when you can't do anything and you're lying on a bed physiologically fucked. Most people are doing stuff that they don't want to do, masking their whole entire life in cheap thrills, a shitty environment, and they haven't installed the boundaries and the non-negotiables that are going to starve your brain of distraction. So you build them in, they become a habit. My energy is my greatest asset, and I protect it with behaviors, habits, tools, environments, and discipline.
Yeah. And Phil, I appreciate you being here. I just want to finish on one last quick fire question. This can be as long or short as you want it to be. I think this would be a great mic drop moment to finish on. What's one hard truth about building a business that most people aren't willing to hear?
None of it matters. Nobody cares. So don't grip too tightly. You'll either get that or you won't.
I like
Nobody
it.
cares. Nobody cares how much money you make. Nobody cares how big you get. The only person that cares is you. So stop thinking the bigger you build it, the better you build it, the more you're going to be respected, appreciated. Only you can validate yourself. Nobody else can validate you. At the end of the day, you might get a tap on the back here and there, but as soon as that tap on the back's over, nobody cares. Build for you.
Well, great way to end. Perfect. Exactly what I wanted from the mic drop moment. So I appreciate that and appreciate you, Phil. I know you're a busy man and I appreciate you coming on today. I know a lot of people are going to get a ton of value out of
My
this today.
pleasure. It's my pleasure.
Thank you, good stuff. We'll speak soon. Take care.